speech of His Majesty for this occasion is concerning the iron blend. Glory to Word, glory to Son, glory to the Power. We say now, as we have said then, the national flag is the symbol of a nation's independence. Our national flag was never cancelled, not even during the 5 years of the partial occupation of Ethiopia, because our valiant patriot under our orders courageously resisted the enemy. Many countries refused to recognize the occupation, and there the Ethiopian flag continued as an emblem of Ethiopian freedom. Presenting this flag to the 2nd Battalion, which under our command marched into the capital, symbolizes our triumphant entry into Addis Ababa, which does not limit its significance to the battalion, but is of meaning to the whole of the empire. This flag you receive now is the symbol not only of the resistance and the sacrifice endured during the exile. It is witness to the historic moment when we raised the Ethiopian flag at Omeda. The value of a flag springs from the sacrifices made to defend it as the symbol of independence. Otherwise, there is no difference between a flag and any other piece of cloth. That is why the flag is our eternal source of inspiration, of loyalty, and the symbol of the sacred duty and obligation of a soldier. To him, it is a moral centennial. We hope the Almighty will fulfill this trust. See you.
Yeah. Glory to words, glory to song, glory to the Iowa, Haile, Selassie, a sound for the elders. Elders of our community, basically our INCIENT, should bear in mind that they are the custodian of the customs and traditions of our community, of which the students should be mindful to establish to the modern education, to their modern education. And I must also remember the reality of why it's different today, it's different from the realities of yesterday. Let me go on it again. I must also remember that the reality of today is different from the realities of yesterday. I must be mindful as we cannot turn the clock backwards. In this different world of today, I must strive to what I have set for ourselves to achieve. Change is the law of nature and the law of life. Peaceful resolution and dispute. This as it should be, for when brothers quarrel, as it happens from time to time, they come together and discuss the issues concerned in a very open manner and attempt to arrive at an amicable, agreed solution.
That speech of His Majesty, where the INCIENT is concerned, is very important. By that speech, I have to take up the high responsibility as the custodian of the state. So, brethren and sisters, that speech connected to I spiritually. That speech of His Majesty. And from now and after, there will be no vice can counteract the vice of the Haitian Council of the Nyabinghi. And we have very important people amongst I who willing to work with I and I as the INCIENT of this state, because they already know the disadvantage and the plight that I and I go through to our own brothers and sisters, to individuals, you know, only seeking for their family, their friends, crops and colleagues.
Yes.
They do not matter about the congregation, the Nyabinghi congregation. So I can identify the individuals who are working night and day over the internet and the laptop for to see I and I get I and I justice through the law. Haile.
Yeah, that's right.
First on the agenda, the South African delegation. That delegation and the people that I man speak to, right? They have I and I as races at heart. And within the future, I and I will rejoice to the end. Because South Africa were underneath apartheid. When they were underneath their political struggle, they called for 3 volunteers. I were one of the volunteers. And when the brethren then called for the delegation, I did not go to South Africa. The priest and his son and a woman go on the delegation. Right? So whether war or peace, I volunteer my life as a Ethiopian to defend our cause. Don't care what it may be. See? Yet I and I does not come to fight against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers in high and low places. Haile.
So just to follow up on Bongo Waitai's remarks, the South African delegation was here based on a bilateral agreement between Jamaica and South Africa regarding the nutraceutical industry. It was a bilateral that was signed a couple of years ago, but because of our agitation around ganja, we had promoted to the Jamaican government that they should align with South Africa in the stepping out about the legalization, because South Africa is a larger country and Jamaica was going to be the first African-based country that was stepping up with regards to legalization. All the legalization that has been talked about from the level of the United Nations has been through the South American countries and some European and North American countries and states. So the African voice in the diaspora and at home is not yet on the table. So with Jamaica stepping out, we felt it was important to encourage Jamaica to partner with South Africa. And as a community, we had a special reason that we wanted to do it, was because the South African government recognized the Rastafari community as an indigenous group, as they have recognized all of their indigenous groups, the Zulus, the Khoisans, etc. And they passed laws in the government to protect all of those groups in all affairs of culture, trade, commerce. So because the Rastafari are protected in South Africa and remain unprotected in Jamaica, we thought that it was important in stepping forward to have them be at the table with us. It worked out ironically because this year is they intended to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Ancient Council trod into South Africa as the beginning of their Nyabinghi National Council. The Nyabinghi National Council in South Africa is a leading Rastafari voice speaking with the government and negotiating with them around the same ganja cannabis sacramental rights. So everything was coming together in relation to the linkages between the communities, not just because of a theoretical overstanding that the government was supportive of communities, indigenous communities' rights, but because the Nyabinghi has also a special consideration amongst the Rastafari family there, acknowledging to the government there that it is the Nyabinghi Ancient Council that is the governance of their whole tribe, which is an important moral and legal acknowledgement to be occurring now, because we are under such siege here in Jamaica related to our cultural rights and who should be governing. So they came and they met with the various universities, governments, ministers, etc. In all of the meetings you could see the difference between the South African government approach and the Jamaican government societal approach. In Jamaica they deal with rich and poor. So everything, everybody's poor, and whatever they're doing is for the poor. And you could see the two different type of reasonings happening back and forth, where the South Africans were drilling down that in the industrial development of the nutraceutical, which is coming about to be a multi-billion-dollar industry, because the pharmaceutical, medical treatment of the world is moving from pharmaceutical to natural-based medicine. And the people who have been the owners of the natural-based medicines over the years has been the indigenous communities. So the protection is that it's not only about the money related to the new industry and its use, but when they go to this new industry, you who has been using these herbs could find yourself not having access to them. The most important protection is that you have to have continued access to these herbs. And when the herbs become known or promoted, you find that they were naturally in their environment, and now they are not anymore because everyone knows moringa or Guinean weed or whatever is needed. And so they are taking them away out of your reach, right? So it's very crucial for us to understand what is happening. It's not just about the business, it's about the community's free access to the plant to continue to practice your traditional medicine and so on. So it was a very important meeting and a timing of the meeting, because South Africa was about to pass their ganja laws, and they were stopped by the law, the indigenous law that was on the books, and they had to hold back their legalization of ganja, or daga as they call it there, until the indigenous communities were completely satisfied in their rights and in their benefits and so forth. So because of the Rastafari community linkage with South Africa, and the Rastafari community being the largest known group globally that is indigenous, they recognize the partnership with the Rastafari community. And so they have approved that there will be 2 pilot programs designed between the Nyabinghi Ancient Council and the Nyabinghi National Council where they're going to support the development of 2 holistic villages. Now these holistic villages will we call it? It will bring forward the knowledge in a defined space, right? Holistically, so that rather than it being general knowledge, it's going to be specific and owned by the Rastafari community. They're also going to do it for other traditional communities, but the first community that is going to benefit under the bilateral will be the Nyabinghi Ancient Council with the Nyabinghi National Council. Now the Nyabinghi National Council in South Africa is aware that the mission is repatriation, right? So while the bilateral is speaking and will be emphasizing and creating the platform for this, it is the mandate now of the organizations within themselves to look at the platform and build around the platform what the community's agenda is. The governments are not going to do that, right? So the responsibility now would be for precise communication now between the Ancient Council and the Nyabinghi National Council for the other objectives of the community, building on this bilateral holistic agreement. In that holistic agreement, it's already been reasoned on that the elders of the community are important to safeguard, and to safeguard in response of their repatriation, right? Not just safeguard in terms of their health and their welfare, but the repatriation of the elders is a very important activity within the scope to occur. And in repatriating the elders, the health of the elders is going to be important in this transfer. So the community in South Africa clearly understands that in the development of the holistic village there, it is to help to put that platform in for the repatriation. You know, repatriation of all, but there's a very high focus on the repatriation of the elders, right? Well, just is there, right? Because it's something that is present, right? And this, you know, they went as so far as to say that they're even looking at places that are climatic, you know, etc.
Similar to Jamaica.
Similar, but just not because parts of South Africa are cold, etc. etc.
Yeah.
Now the idea about South Africa, we have to keep our eyes open. South Africa is only a stepping stone presently on the table to Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Ethiopia now is viewed through the lens of the African Union being in Ethiopia. South Africa is the facilitator for the African Union's interrelationship with the diaspora. So the African Union has a bilateral with the diaspora that is overseen by South Africa. So while they're looking at the specific of the South Africa bilateral, they'll also be looking at how this project can be expanded under the AU bilateral. And specifically we're looking at how Ethiopia fits into that bilateral in order to make that move into Ethiopia. So the Ethiopian move also, because interestingly, the dagga from South Africa, which is the ganja, and the ganja from the highlands of Ethiopia, like the Jamaican ganja, are some of the highest regarded strains in the world, right? So it is, again, once we have this information, is for I and I to become creative in how we engage, right? in the ganja conversation about medical and whatever, the pharmaceutical use of ganja is years away, right? So the nutraceutical use, the ointments, the traditional, and its integration with food is going to be the marketplace now for the next X amount of years. So what we're looking at specifically in Ethiopia, because Ethiopia has certain herbs, not only ganja but other herbs like coffee or certain specific herbs that can be utilized to make these superfoods, that we would be now focused on Ethiopia to see how this new market and our relationship with this market and product can initiate trade, commerce, and a platform for our communities to grow in those countries. So this is a very important negotiation to watch from the Jamaican perspective, what is happening governmentally. Again, I just must acknowledge the Baba Shanti community whose agitation in Ghana has also been picked up, right? So Ghana will also be another country that we're going to focus on in this bilateral coming out of Jamaica. So we had 3 countries identified, which is South Africa, Ethiopia, and Ghana, that we're going to use strategically. Well, we're going to use the pilot in South Africa to initiate these other two. But we have to get that on the ground. We have to get that concretized, and then we can transfer it, So when things happen like this, you like to think about it one after the other, but things are happening around it that might make it simultaneous. You understand? So even though you speak one after other, like in a sequence, things are moving in another level that might just spin it out, for whatever reason, right? So the need for our community now to exercise what we're going to talk about now, authority, because our challenge in Jamaica is the authority. Okay, so with the South Africa, we are waiting now on their official report, which should come in the next week or so. The Jamaican government is supposed to go there in November to sign off on the bilateral, and once that is signed off, then the actual projects, can start being spoken of. But it is important now for the Nyabinghi Ancient Council to be communicating with the Nyabinghi National Council, in South Africa to, start that reasoning moving forward. RASTA